Welcome. Please comment where you're watching from in the world. We agreed to meet at a bistro in Portland's Pearl District, a place called Ondina, known for its vibrant, open atmosphere. It felt safe, neutral, a good start. I walked in, told the hostess I was waiting for someone, and before I could even finish my sentence, she smiled, a little too wide, and said, "Oh, he's already here. He told us you'd be coming. Said you were the one with the dark hair and the scarf." Her tone was overly cheerful, almost conspiratorial, like she was rooting for this first date to go well, a pre-written narrative. That should have been nice, a warm welcome, but it immediately felt suffocating. It was presumptuous of him to announce my arrival, to describe me, before I'd even set foot in the door, before he'd even seen me. It felt like a small but deliberate move, staking a claim before I even got to the table. Red flag number 1, a whisper of static on the line. When I got to the table, he stood up quickly, smiling a little too wide, his eyes a shade too intense. On the table in front of him was a small, neatly wrapped gift, tied with a silver ribbon. I didn't know what to make of that. He said it was just a little something he'd found at an antique shop in Old Town Alexandria. I didn't care that it wasn't new. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that we'd never met before. Bringing a gift to a blind date felt like emotional overreach, like he was trying to force a level of intimacy that didn't exist yet, to bypass the natural progression of connection. It was an offering, but it felt more like a tether. Red flag number 2, a sudden cold spot in the room. Then, as we settled into conversation, he started talking about his ex. Not just casually, but with this weird, rehearsed cadence, as though he'd been waiting for an audience to deliver this monologue. He said, "My last girlfriend just up and left one day while I was out. Didn't even tell me she was leaving. Just disappeared." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a theatrical beat. I remember feeling that sentence settle heavily between us, chilling the air that had been so vibrant moments before. He said it like he was the victim of something mysterious, an inexplicable tragedy, but there was no trace of confusion in his eyes, only a hard, simmering resentment. I work as a counselor specializing in trauma, and that set off alarms instantly. In my experience, women only leave that way, quietly, suddenly, when they're afraid. Afraid for their safety, afraid of retaliation, afraid of violence. Women who aren't in that kind of situation usually tell someone, ask for help, make a plan. His story didn't add up, and his tone confirmed what I already suspected. He wasn't just a victim, he was the reason. Red flag number 3, a sudden, blinding flash. When the evening ended, I felt a profound sense of relief more than anything. He insisted on walking me outside, down the cobbled streets of the Pearl District, and I didn't argue, just wanted to escape. We exchanged polite words, the standard, "it was nice meeting you" type of thing, and then, without warning, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't forceful, but it wasn't invited either. It was a declaration, a decision he'd made without consulting me, a final act of ownership for the evening. He just decided that because the date had happened, he was entitled to it. I froze, too polite, too conditioned to make a scene, but inside I was fuming, my skin crawling. Red flag number 4, a hand closing around my wrist. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured if I didn't call him again, he'd get the message. But a week later, I came home to my small apartment in the Hawthorne district, past the flickering neon sign of the Baghdad Theater, and found a message blinking on my answering machine. His voice, cheerful but somehow off, a little too close, a little too familiar. He said something like, "Haven't heard from you, just wanted to check in. Hope you're doing well. I was just thinking about that little coffee shop we passed on Belmont. Maybe we could grab a cup there sometime." That was when the uneasy feelings started creeping in, a cold dread seeping into the corners of my mind. The way he spoke, the timing of the call, I got the distinct impression he already knew when I'd be home to hear it. It wasn't just a random check-in. It felt calculated, a reminder that he was still there, still watching. I had that primal sense of being observed, of a boundary dissolving. It's hard to explain, but anyone who's worked with domestic violence survivors knows exactly what I mean. It's the feeling you learn not to question, a whisper of ancient fear. Red flag number 5, the shadow at the edge of my vision. I never called him back. I didn't owe him that. I figured any contact, even to say no thanks, would only feed his obsession. Something in my gut, that ancient knowing, told me that if I did, he'd show up at my door within minutes, a grinning specter. Looking back, there were smaller signs too, subtle shifts in the air around him. The way he held his head slightly tilted down when he disagreed with me, not in deference, but as if calculating something, preparing his next move. The way his eyes hardened, not because we had differing opinions, that's normal, healthy, but because he seemed personally threatened by any deviation from his narrative, any challenge to his control. It wasn't the content of our conversation that was alarming, it was his visceral reaction to not having complete ownership of it. I've met people since then who have quirks, flaws, baggage. Who doesn't? But this was different. Every red flag tied into the same chilling thread: control. From the moment he told the restaurant staff I was the one he was waiting for, to the unwanted kiss, to the uneasy feeling that he was still watching afterward, perhaps from a dark car parked on my street, it was all about ownership, about asserting his will. Luckily, I met my husband not long after that, a good man, calm, grounded, steady, like the deep roots of an old-growth forest. When we started dating, I often saw a white pickup truck, a Ford F-150 with a rusted bumper, parked a few blocks from my apartment, sometimes in front of the vintage store on Division Street, sometimes near the park. I don't know for sure if it was the same man, and I never went outside to check. But I didn't need to. I just closed the curtains and went on with my life, grateful that I'd learned to listen when something deep inside whispered, "This isn't safe." I've been fortunate to have never had any traumatic dates, but I did have the displeasure of accompanying an acquaintance on a pseudo-double date meetup. For some contextual background info, this happened about 30 years ago when I was in my mid-20s. I was never a big dating fan. While I am an effusive and passionate person, I don't like the plethora of game playing and posturing that seems to be an ingrained aspect of dating. Coupled with the fact that my Asian Hawaiian upbringing taught me to be somewhat guarded and passive, it's easy to see why I didn't date very often in my formative face with tears of joy years. I didn't have a girlfriend till I was 25 and had only dated for separate people prior to that. Here's a little info about my friend George, real name. Met him at my gym in Honolulu. I believe he was about 3 to 5 years older than me. He was one of a group of guys that I trained with. We were all into weight training and running, and we all channeled this training into running events, biathlons, and or triathlons. While I was a decent runner and the second fastest of our group, George was a way better overall athlete, and unlike me, was a solid swimmer and bicyclist too. I still own a Cannondale 10 speed bike he sold me back in the day. So one day George asked me if I would go with him to a bar. Being the no-nonsense guy I am, I asked why. He said he just wanted to go out for some drinks and wonder if I was interested. Even though I don't drink at all now, I still didn't drink much back in the day, so I knew there was an ulterior motive to his request. He said there was this girl he wanted to meet up with, but she wouldn't meet up with him unless she could bring her friend. So he was looking for a wingman, and he knew that I didn't have a girlfriend. Naturally, I told him I really wasn't interested, but he convinced me to go, and for the sake of brotherhood, I agreed, but I warned him that I was going to be me, for better or for worse, not an actor in his play. The bar was in Waikiki, that's all I can remember. Typical crowd, girls in nice dresses, guys in silky long-sleeve polyester shirts with big collars and gabardine pants. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. It was corny and goofy in the 1980s. Trust me, rolling on the floor laughing. We find the girl and her friend at the bar, shocker. George starts talking to his lady, henceforth referred to as Irma. Not her real name, at least I hope not, faced with tears of joy, while her friend and me remained silent, save for a few words of introduction. George and Irma continued to yak it up, playing leading roles in a garish play that encompassed every tired and formulaic dating cliché and body gesture that made me grit my teeth and want to bang my head against the nearest wall. At some point, the conversation turned to working out and exercising, which we could all relate to. Irma, in classic diva mode, had to mention, "I don't like working out because I get too hot." I responded, "So you don't like to sweat, huh?" You would have thought that I had just pissed on the queen. She responded, "Women don't sweat, they glisten." Weary face, I am not making this up. After about 30 minutes of this, with no end in sight, he was done. I couldn't do this any longer. I would rather have my teeth extracted one by one with a pair of rusty pliers. When I reach this mental state, I tend to lash out, with snarky behavior. Irma was about the same age as George, so she acted like she was mature than I am, and when I made a rare comment on something she said, she brushed my comment away and said that since I was younger, I wouldn't understand. I can't stand condescending people, so naturally I responded with, "How old are you?" I can tell this completely pissed her off, and I really didn't care. George gives me a glare, and I didn't care about that either. She responded with, You never ask a woman how old she is." I defiantly responded with, "I just did," and I walked out of the bar. I saw so much red that to this day I don't remember if George followed me out or I just got ride home. I do remember that George and I never kept in touch much after that. In the grand scheme of things, this really wasn't that big a deal compared to a lot of other dating horror stories, but it was still entertaining for me, and my disdain for casual dating remains. So enough storytelling. Time for a workout. All I wanted was someone to talk to me, so I downloaded Tinder. At first, I thought this place could be full of gold diggers. To be honest, I was right. I met some gold diggers through it. Though I wasn't there to get into a relationship, I was looking for someone who could just talk with me for a while. So after a few days, I met a young lady named, let's call her, Alia. Judging by her profile, she was pretty. Her Instagram was full of women's footwear. Maybe she or her dad owned a women's footwear shop, and some sunset pictures. And her bio was something like, "I will judge you by your shoes." We started talking. At first, she asked me about my work. At that moment, I thought she might be a gold digger, but I replied to that anyway. After that, I asked her about a few things. Her next question to me was about my childhood. I was like, WTF? A gold digger never talks about such things, right? Further conversations were completely normal, and after a few days, she shared her number with me, after which we decided to meet. I picked her up, and we decided to go to McDonald's. When I first saw her, she was adorable, and the black leather jacket and black t-shirt, she looked really lovely on her. Upon seeing me, she looked at my sneaker, and then while looking at me, she smiled and said, "Kiski Radek Rahi? Chelo Jaldi. Who are you waiting for? Let's go." We entered the MCD, and because I still had trust issues with her, I left my wallet inside the car before leaving. She ordered a veg makalu tiki burger with cola, and I took the veg Mexican makalu tiki burger. While we were talking, she was often looking at my sneakers. I asked her about it and she said, "Those are cute," after which she asked me about her footwear. I kind of felt funny there. I almost lost it and was about to laugh, but controlled it. I said they looked nice. While we were ordering food, I acted as I forgot my wallet at home and told her so. In return, she said, "Koi bat nahi. Mi pay card dedi hun." Don't worry, I will pay. At that moment I was shocked. When we left, I told her the truth. She seemed mad a little bit, but before she could say anything, I said, "Let's go for a movie right now, and this time I will pay." Whenever we meet, we still hang out sometimes, and Alia always judges my shoes. Kind of a weird story, but still I found a sweet friend on Tinder. Buckle up, people. This happened December 2017. Involved police and a broken pelvis, smiley face. I matched with this guy on Tinder, and we decided we'd meet up at a cafe. Now, me being a lass, I wouldn't mind paying the bill, but the first red flag was this guy telling the cashier he doesn't have change. Like, okay, I could just pay, but his excuse was rubbish. I saw his wallet, and he wasn't even poor. Okay, so we sat down and talked, and I noticed this guy kept twitching here and there. He kept rolling his eyes. When I asked him about it, he claimed to have epilepsy. But then when we were about to part ways, he told me he was on meth. Now at this point I was like, FK this SHYE, I'm out. But the next day he asked me to attend this work party with him as friends, which was fine with me. After the party, I decided to go to his place. I never had sex with him or did anything with him. To sleep for the night, as it was quite a distance back to my place and public transport had closed. But just so happened that night, his housemate was celebrating her birthday, so we both had a few drinks, and I decided to sleep in his room for a bit. I even set an alarm. Now this is the start of the fucked up part. Let's refer my Tinder date as Ron. While I was sleeping, I felt someone kiss me, and then proceed to touch me. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then I felt a sharp pain in my vagina, as if it had been scratched by nails, and jumped. To my surprise, I saw two heads, as dark as silhouettes in front of me. As I tried to get up, and they held me down. I tried to scream and kick around. They ran out the door, left me alone in the room. As I switched on the lights, I sat on the floor, my back leaning on the door, crying. What the hell just happened? I did not see Ron until a couple hours later at 4 a.m. He told me he went out to buy cigarettes, but I guess he went to buy drugs. As I told him his housemates harassed me, he didn't believe me, and instead called me a whore for seducing them. Now this is the even more effed up part. He kept implying his theories into my head, and made me go crazy. I was emotionally weak. I just wanted to go home. The next day, I told Ron I'm going home, so I walked to the station, he wanted to follow for whatever reason. Along the way to the station, he kept spewing his stupid theories to me, like he blamed me for being drunk, or me staying too close to the culprits. Mind you, I never even talked to them until stuff happened. I got so fed up I told him to shut up and stay away from me. And when I reached the train station, I fell down the stairs. Police ahead, this is the most effed up part. I am still traumatized and depressed whenever I think back. I woke up in the hospital, I did not remember what happened, and I could not move my legs. I woke up to an inspector asking me questions like, "Are you on drugs?" Or "Why did you jump?" I was so confused, I wasn't sure what just happened. That night, the police told me they had found meth in my bag. And they have a suspect, and I might know the suspect. So when the police showed me a picture of Ron, tears ran down my eyes and I had trouble breathing. I could not feel my face. I was so scared, but I told them what happened to me. They took my statement and opened a case for me, did a rape kit test, tested my blood for drugs, etc. They told me they will get back to me once they've taken the suspect's statements. It took me a few months to fully recover. In the end, Ron got deported back to Canada. He's Canadian, can you even believe it? The culprits were bailed out of jail and fled to another state. And that's my traumatizing Tinder experience. Congratulations if you made it this far, thanks for reading. This is just 80% of the story, as I fear it will be too damn long to write the entire thing. Edit. I came back to read the comments to see what kind of feedback I got. Yes, I know I made a stupid mistake, and it was one hell of a lesson for me. Too much of a price to pay, in fact. Never again am I going back on Tinder. It's better to meet people in real life, even though it's not that easy, and it is much better to always be aware of your surroundings. But hey, it was my own mistake. I am owning up for it and doing the best I can to improve myself. I really appreciate the positive feedback as well, and I am doing very well today, and I just graduated college, continuing my master's next summer. Thanks guys, much love XXXX. Also, I am not from India, but I am in Southeast Asia. My test results showed I was clean from anything, no STDs or baby or drugs. I was 26 when it happened. She was 34, married, gorgeous, confident in a way that only older women are. We met online, one of those random chats that start with harmless flirting and end up crossing every line imaginable. She was from Delhi, sophisticated, the kind of woman who looked like she'd never been told no. Within a week, our conversations turned explicit. She told me her husband was always traveling, and that she wanted to cheat on him with someone younger. With me. At the time, I was newly single and thought the universe had finally rewarded me for my heartbreak. Sleeping with a married woman had always sounded like one of those impossible fantasies, something you laugh about with your friends, but never actually expect to happen. But there she was, beautiful, older, and completely unfiltered about what she wanted. Our first meeting was in my apartment, a 3 BHK I shared with 2 other guys. She came over on a Friday night, dressed like she was walking straight out of a perfume commercial, tight jeans, red lipstick, and a dangerous kind of confidence. We barely made it past the door before things got wild. That night, we slept together 4 times, and I remember lying there afterward thinking, this can't be real. That one night turned into weeks. For nearly a month, we met every few days, sneaking into hotels, my apartment, and even her car once. She had a high sex drive, always with a new fantasy, a new what if she wanted to try. I counted roughly 20 times we hooked up in total. Somewhere along the line, I stopped thinking of her as someone's wife and started seeing her as an addiction. Then one night, she said something that changed everything. She wanted to do it in her own house. In her bed. The same bed she shared with her husband. At first I laughed. It sounded insane. But she wasn't joking. She said, "It turns me on to imagine you inside me where my husband sleeps." I thought maybe she just hated the guy and wanted revenge. I won't lie, I was into it. The thought felt dirty, taboo, and exciting in the worst way. So I agreed. Her house was huge, 2 floors, high walls, marble floors that echoed when I walked. You could tell her husband had money. She greeted me in a silk robe, kissed me at the door, and led me upstairs to their bedroom. The bed was massive, neatly made, with family pictures framed on the wall. It was surreal, like walking into a place I wasn't supposed to exist. We started making out, and just when things were heating up, she whispered, "I want to try something new tonight." She pulled out a pair of handcuffs from her drawer and smiled. "Let me cuff you. I want to be in control for once." I hesitated for a second, but went along. Why not? We'd done stranger things before. She fastened one cuff around my wrist, then stopped. "Wait here. I'll be right back," she said, walking toward the kitchen. That pause, those few minutes, saved my life. I have this habit of drinking a glass of water before sex. Don't ask me why, it's just something I do. So while she was gone, I went to the kitchen, looking for a glass. I opened the refrigerator and froze. Inside, right on the middle shelf, was a human forearm. Not a prop. Not fake. A real human arm. The skin was pale bluish. The hand was curled slightly, and there were still fingernails on it. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My brain refused to register what I was looking at. I felt the room spin. Then she called from upstairs, her voice echoing through the hall. "Babe, where are you?" That snapped me out of my paralysis. I didn't think, I just ran. I bolted out of the kitchen, down the stairs, through the front door, barefoot and half-dressed. My shirt was still inside, but thank God I still had my jeans on. My phone and wallet were in the pocket. I didn't even look back. I just ran down the street like a madman until I saw a Puma outlet. I walked in, bought the first t-shirt I saw, and slipped it on, still shaking. While waiting for a cab, my phone buzzed. A new message. From her. "I think you forgot your t-shirt, winky face." I swear my stomach dropped. That smiley face, it was the coldest, creepiest thing I've ever seen. I unmatched her immediately, blocked her number, deleted every message. The next morning, I packed my bag and flew back to my hometown. I didn't tell anyone the full story for months. Even now, when I think about it, my chest tightens. I didn't sleep properly for weeks. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be her again. Get ready for a ride. And please remember, before going on, that I was young and dumb at the time, and that I am much wiser now. Years ago, I matched with this guy on Tinder. Let's call him John. His profile picture was cute, boyish smile, nice hair, clean skin, and he had government employed listed as his occupation. That sounded respectable, right? The kind of job where he might wear a badge or a suit. Someone stable. Someone serious. We started chatting, and he was funny, polite, and surprisingly attentive. Within a week, we were messaging every night. It felt like something real was brewing. When he finally suggested we meet, I said yes without hesitation. He offered to pick me up from the mall near my place, so we could go somewhere from there. I know, red flag number one. Never let a stranger pick you up. But like I said, I was young, idealistic, and absolutely convinced I was about to meet my future husband. When he arrived, I spotted him immediately, and my heart sank a little. He looked different. The pictures had definitely been edited. His face was covered with old burn scars, or maybe severe acne scars. It was hard to tell. I felt guilty for even noticing. Don't be shallow, I told myself. He's nice. Looks aren't everything. So I got in the car, buckled up, and smiled. That's when he said, "Hey, I just got transferred to a new office in the city. Do you mind if we drive by it before we go out? I just want to see where I have to park and go in tomorrow." "Sure," I said, excited. In my head, I pictured him in some sleek government building downtown, maybe in a gray suit holding a clipboard, all official and important. I imagined him scanning his ID badge through some high-tech glass door while I waited, impressed. Except as we drove, I noticed we were heading toward the RFK bridge. That's away from the city. I frowned, trying to stay calm. "I thought you said your office was in the city?" I asked carefully. "Oh, yeah, it is," he said quickly. "I work for the government, sanitation department." "Oh, sanitation. Now, don't get me wrong, I have zero issues with sanitation workers. They work hard and make solid money with benefits." But the thing was, he hadn't said sanitation on his profile. He said government employed, which, to be fair, was true, but definitely misleading. I had envisioned a man in a crisp shirt with a badge clipped to his belt. Instead, I was sitting in the passenger seat of a sedan rolling into what looked like an industrial wasteland. We slowed down near what I can only describe as a garbage facility. The air got heavier, the smell stronger. I pressed my nose discreetly against my sleeve. At least I won't have to get out, I thought to myself. Just a quick look around, and we'll be off to dinner. Then he pulled over and put the car in reverse. "What are you doing?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Parking," he said, like it was obvious. "I wanted to see where the entrance of my building is, remember?" "Oh, do I have to get out?" He looked genuinely offended. "Well, of course. I'm not going to leave you in the car alone." Oh, how chivalrous, I thought dryly. So there I was, in a cute little miniskirt and pumps, tiptoeing through gravel and God knows what, surrounded by the hum of garbage trucks. The smell was so bad it was physical, like it crawled inside my nose and refused to leave. I immediately texted my group chat. If I go missing, John from Tinder did it. Car, gray Toyota Corolla. License plate, redacted. Currently standing in the middle of a garbage dump. Send prayers. He held my hand as we walked around, pointing out random things. That's where the trucks come in, he said proudly, as if giving me a tour of a museum. I nodded politely, pretending to care while my soul quietly left my body. This is it. I texted my friends again. This is how I die. After about 10 agonizing minutes of walking around garbage, John clapped his hands and said cheerfully, "Well, I guess I have to feed you now, right?" "No, really, that's okay." I started. "I insist," he said, cutting me off with a grin. Next thing I knew, we were back in the car, and I was praying he'd take me to a normal restaurant. But no. We stopped at a seedy little diner that looked like it hadn't seen a renovation since the 80s. Flickering fluorescent lights, a cracked vinyl booth, and the faint smell of stale fries. I could see bugs hovering near the lamps, and the ketchup bottle on the table looked older than me. John sat down like this was his favorite place in the world. He ordered a hamburger. I asked for fries because I figured it was hard to mess those up. Then in front of me, without hesitation, he reached into his water glass with his bare hand, scooped up a handful of ice, and popped it into his mouth. Crunch. Loud. Aggressive. Open-mouthed. I froze. He did it again. And again. Every few seconds, the sound of his teeth grinding ice echoed across the tiny diner. I couldn't even eat. My jaw was locked. I sat there staring at him, thinking, there's no way this man doesn't know how horrifying this is. He didn't. We drove back in silence. I think even he could feel the energy had died somewhere between the garbage dump and the bug-infested diner. When we finally reached the mall parking lot, he turned to me and said softly, "Can I at least have a hug?" I gave the world's most awkward pat on the back, murmured, "I'll call you," and bolted. I blocked his number before I even hit the escalator. And that, my friends, is how I learned that government employed can mean a lot of things, and that sometimes, when a man offers to show you his workplace, you should just say no and take the train instead. A few years ago, I was invited to this guy's place to hang out after talking a while. I got there late after work, and he greeted me, and we went in his place. First couple red flags were 1. He looked nothing like his pictures, and 2. He became immediately grabby and needy, like we were already a couple that missed each other. Odd. I told him to cool down and started asking questions about his pictures online, and he laughs and goes, "Oh, I've been using my brother's Tinder profile." Great. Should have left right then and there. Instead, I ask about interests like gaming. He showed me some games I had always wanted to play, and after maybe 5 minutes of watching me play, he attacks my neck. Now, I am usually all about biting and hickeys, but this feeling was not a turn-on in any way. It felt like a wet vacuum in odd parts of my neck, so I again pushed him off and told him to relax. He's getting the wrong idea. His response to that was, "But you sent me a sexy pic in that tank top. You can't do that and then back out. I am expecting you to follow up on that." Well, I immediately laugh, grab my keys, and explain this was a bad idea. "I need to go if you think I owe you anything." He realizes, oh rap, she's really going to leave, and starts begging me not to and to just hear him out. He then goes on a spiel about how difficult it is to be a single father and all the crappy things exes have done to him over the years. "Yeah, I feel bad people have wronged you, man, but don't make me pay for it by subjecting me like this." By this time it's about 2 a.m. and I need to get the hell back home. He follows me to my car, still asking, "Are you sure you want to leave? You can stay here. Please stay." I kindly repeat that it's time for me to get back and get rest in my own house when suddenly he grabs my hand hard. And this is why it's one of my worst Tinder dates, and states, "Okay, let me show you what you're missing out on by leaving." Squeezing my hand, he shoves my hand in between his legs and basically makes me wipe him from a hole to D, and I immediately scream, "Dude, EWWWTF," because not only was that disgusting, but he had these massive swollen balls, and then this weird tiny pee-pee head. It just all felt so gross and wrong, so after pushing him back and telling him to get the F off me, I hopped in my car, started laughing hysterically, and I didn't even care that it was 2 a.m. I left him there, and all the way out of the neighborhood started screaming, "OH my god. Super fail, never went on Tinder again." What did I learn? Don't ever go to a person's house for a first meet. Don't assume everyone tells the truth, and if your gut says something is wrong right away, Do not ignore it. Get the hell out of there. I had just gotten out of a long 5 years relationship. I was broken, and to be brutally honest, I wanted to get in the sack with someone that was the exact opposite of my ex. I matched with this guy. He was 30, I was 22. We instantly hit it off. He had a beard, tall, was extremely funny and down to earth. An earthy/hippie personality that my ex was not. I thought to myself, I need this change. We spoke on the phone a few times, and his voice matched his picture. We told crazy life stories and just laughed and laughed. I hung up grinning ear to ear, anticipating on his next text. We eventually arranged to get together that weekend. Firstly, at the last minute before our date, he calls and says, "My truck won't start, can you pick me up?" Okay, sure, he lives 10 minutes from me, so why not? Life happens. So I pull up, and he's exactly how I pictured. We're flirting and laughing. I expected slight awkwardness, but there was none. Checkmate. Winner winner chicken dinner. Haha. Well, he suggests dinner at this bar that he frequents at, that turns into a club at night. We're in downtown on a Friday night, and this place is packed. He chats with the bartender and introduces me, who barely acknowledges my presence, but whatever. Chalked it up to a busy night, no big deal. As we start talking and having a few, he repeatedly tells me that he's paying for everything. Firstly, that is not dating etiquette regardless, but I had a feeling he wasn't up to date with the whole dating scene. I even knew this being out of it since I was 17, so basically never. I noticed that he barely pays attention to me, talking about himself and his life. At one point he mentions, "You have no idea the things I've seen and gone through." I instinctively laugh awkwardly and quickly change the subject. "I just freaking met you, dude, what?" Our conversation wasn't even remotely close to any hard topic. At this point he gets even more serious, while I'm awkwardly laughing, hoping it'll lighten the mood again. He says, "I have a proposition for you. I'm a dom, meaning dominatrix. I want to have a dom and submissive relationship with you. Basically 50 Shades of Grey for anyone familiar. Basically this handsome jackass wants to tie me up, whip me and fuck my brains out." My naive self is thinking, sure, no questions asked, when can we start? I'm not the brightest crayon in the crayon box apparently. Facepalm. Anyways, fast forward to later in the night. So I inevitably, despite my best judgment, end up getting trashed, and my aunt had to pick us up. It was terrible. I saw him again after this. I know, facepalm. Fast forward the next weekend. I had just left a bachelorette party. I had a couple, not too many to drive, and he texts me, "What's your decision? I want you all to myself." When I leave I head to his house, but he refused to sleep with me. He would egg me on, to the point his face is between my legs, obviously acting like he wanted to, then would stop and say, "I know I'm 30, but I've only slept with 2 girls, and you'd have to work for it." What? Didn't you just suggest having a BDSM relationship with me precisely 8 days prior? Then drumroll please. He says, "Actually, I really can't sleep with you because my dick is broken. I fell off a ladder at work and I landed on it." Does he not understand that I work in healthcare, and despite my age I'm not an idiot? You need to be hard and land on it for it to be broken. Not while it's flaccid. What an idiot. Is blue balls a thing for women? Because I definitely had it big time. Anyways, turns out he is a felon. Disclaimer, : I do not judge people from their past histories, but he had multiple armed robbery charges, assault, drug possession and DUI on his record for the past 12 years. Most recent was just months prior to meeting him. Thank God for Google. I can only imagine what would have transpired had he tied me up, and would have probably done unspeakable things to me. So yeah, I dodged a bullet there. Wish he wasn't so attractive though. Inevitably it didn't stop me from dating on Tinder, and I won't get into those slightly crazier stories, because frankly I'm embarrassed at my poor choices I've made years ago. But was the most unbelievable Tinder story I've got. Only a few people know this, and I would hate for my colleagues or classmates see this, so yeah, thank God for anonymity. Also, Google your date. Get their last name, and when they become defensive, explain it's for protective purposes. Unless you're a weird, then stay off of Tinder. Hope you all enjoyed my story. I'll probably get the most upvotes for this, compared to my linked account stories, but my womanly blue balls aren't nearly as big as I thought they were. Haha. Once upon a time, I spontaneously asked out a customer of mine on a date. Her name was Rebecca, but went by Reba. When I asked her if she had any idea when she wanted to go, she suggested right after I got off my shift. Considering that I had nothing going on that night, I accepted those terms. Also invited was my co-worker ally. She and I usually finished our shifts at the same time, and I often gave her a ride home from work. She was also a couple of months pregnant, but the father was not in her life. We went to a nearby sports bar, and Reba ordered drinks for all of us while Ally and myself were in the bathroom. As a rule, I don't drink alcohol, and Ally was underage and pregnant at the time, so she couldn't drink either. When we told Reba this, she started crying and calling herself a mess. She then proceeded to show us a fresh-looking bruise that was located on her leg. Apparently her boyfriend had kicked her earlier that day during a fight. They had only been dating 4 months. According to Reba, he was both physically and mentally abusive, and she wanted out. Ally and I did our best to help console and advise her. However, the more she drank, the more incoherent, upset, and defiant she became. At one point, she said that she needed to go outside for a smoke to calm her nerves. I am not a smoker, so Ally went along with her, leaving me alone. Soon after they left, a 40-something woman sitting at the bar came up to me and told me that she was watching us and thought I was cute. She asked me if I wanted to join our group so that we can have a foursome. Sensing that she was a prostitute, I told her I wasn't interested. However, the woman was undeterred. She then started describing in graphic detail how the 4 of us could all have sex with each other at the same time, and even started to demonstrate it by straddling my lap. Right as that was happening, Reba and Ally came back. I explained to them that the woman wanted to have a foursome with us. Reba became angry and told the woman that I was 21. The woman asked me if that was true, and I confirmed it. Then she backed down, stating that she wasn't one to take advantage of someone so young, and went back to the bar. Shortly after the woman left, Ally excused herself to play pool with some guys she knew, leaving me and Reba alone. We got to talking about our lives, and she told me some dark stories about her family and experiences growing up. By the end, she apologized for her behavior and said that she really liked me. I told her that I liked her too. Then she grabbed the front of my shirt and pulled me in for a kiss. Not only was I reluctant to do that, but it was absolutely the worst kiss I ever had in my life. Not only was it sloppy, but her breath tasted like a combination of cherries and cheap cigarettes. Reba seemed to recognize my reluctance, and when we were done, she started breaking down and crying again. I told her that as much as I liked her, the situation was very complicated, and that it wasn't a good idea to do what we were doing, especially if her boyfriend was violent. She told me that she respected me for that, but still cried about it. Ally and I offered to take her to our places and crash, but she declined. Instead, she wanted to go home. However, there was one problem. Neither Reba was not in any state to be driving, and Ally did not have a driver's license. So I volunteered to drive them home in my car. After placing the 2 girls in the back seat, I went to Reba's black Mustang convertible to get some of her stuff to bring home with her. As I was exiting the car, I was approached by the woman who wanted the foursome. She told me that I had a nice car. Before I could explain that it wasn't mine, she pulled me in for a kiss and stuck her hand down my pants. I thanked the woman for the kiss, but told her I had to take the girls home and that I likely couldn't afford having her for the night. She stared at me blankly for a few seconds, and I turned back. To this day, I am not sure if she was an overeager prostitute or if she was just a random person who wanted to do some crazy sexual things that night. The entire ride to Reba's apartment was filled with her moaning in pain, begging me to not leave her and to stay the night. I told her I wouldn't leave her and that I would stay. However, when we brought her to the apartment, to our surprise, the boyfriend was there. Rather than being angry at him for being at her apartment without permission, Reba seemed to think this was a romantic gesture and ran to his arms. He sat down on the couch, and she started curling on his lap, crying, and saying sorry over and over again. He thanked us for getting her home safe, and we left. I took Ally home and walked her to her door. She told me how sweet I was and pulled me into a deep, awkward feeling/kiss, and then turned away. Later on, she texted me that while she loved me as a person, she didn't feel that we were sexually compatible. I responded by stating I had no idea she was even considering us being a couple. She responded by telling me that she considered the previous night a date, even though she knew very well that I was interested in Reba. So yeah, that's the night I went on a date with 2 women without knowing it, punctuated by a run-in with a prostitute/nymphomaniac who had the hots for me for some strange reason. I matched with a guy who was pretty cute, in town for business, and obviously made a lot of money. I was 23, single, and looking for a date. I'm not a gold digger, truly, but if someone just, wants to spend money on me, go for it. Free appetizers taste better. That's science. We met up at a bar off the River Walk, the kind with Edison bulbs, reclaimed wood, and a bartender with a handlebar mustache who takes 10 years to make one cocktail. He walked in like a LinkedIn post in human form. Nice jacket and slacks, like he'd just come from a meeting, crisp white shirt with the faintest blue grid, sleeves tailored to the exact right wrist bone. Nice watch, not too flashy but enough to make you look. Belt matched the shoes, brown, polished, not new but cared for. Clean shaven, fresh haircut, side part sharp enough to slice an orange. This guy is cute and knows how to dress. I'm interested. He smiled when he saw me, stood to pull out my chair, effortlessly charming without trying too hard, and I thought, okay, this might actually be fun. While he waited for me to arrive, he'd chatted up someone at the host stand and somehow scored us free tickets to the dueling piano bar down the street. They just gave me these, he said with a shrug, like free things materialize around him. We clinked glasses, did the short polite first date talk at our meetup spot. Where are you from? How long are you here? And then moved on. The River Walk was its usual theatrical self. Tourists in shorts, couples holding hands, boats sliding by like lazy crocodiles, a saxophonist doing something romantic to careless whisper. The piano bar was a thunderstorm of sound. Two guys at grand pianos yelling out songs, audience waving neon sticks, a bridal party commandeering a table like it was international waters. The host stamped our hands, and we got swallowed by the crowd. He leaned down to ask my drink order. Vodka soda. I shouted into the collar of his jacket. He nodded and disappeared like a very well-dressed ghost. I wormed my way out to the patio to breathe. That's where I found him again, 2 drinks in hand, a cigarette between his fingers. Turns out he was a smoker. Gross. No check. Not a deal breaker, but a quiet mental eyebrow raise. He handed me my drink and stood a little to the side, so the smoke drifted away from me. Considerate. Partial check restored. He was very open, honest, and observant. He scanned people the way a designer scans a room, the way a doctor reads a chart. First bachelorette of the night, he said, nodding at a girl wearing a feather boa and the look of someone who has already lost her phone. Give it an hour, she's going to make a speech about sisterhood and start crying. He wasn't wrong. We spent a lot of time people watching, admiring the drunks like they were a moving art exhibit. A guy in a cowboy hat attempted a split. The hat survived, his dignity did not. We talked about work. He said he was involved in medical purchasing. Supply chain for hospital systems, he added. Maybe because I buy expensive things with other people's money, sounds shady out of context. CHing. I told him about architecture and interiors, how clients use the word timeless when they mean gray, how every boardroom thinks a moss wall is the pinnacle of innovation. He laughed in the right places. Then he said the name of a hospital where I'd just finished a lobby renovation and another where I'd worked on an oncology suite. What a coincidence. He rattled off vendors and materials like someone reading my group chat. It was impressive. And with medical work, there's always a tiny adrenaline buzz when you realize your worlds are smaller than you think. Inside, a woman in a sequin dress paid the pianist $20 to play Mr. Brightside. I felt a collective groan, and then the irresistible pull to sing the whole thing anyway. After a couple of those big sing-alongs, he tilted his head and suggested we move to the more quiet bar below the pianos. Somewhere we can hear ourselves, he said. My eardrums sighed with relief. Downstairs it was low light, leather banquettes, and jazz that made you want to order something brown and pretend you had complicated problems. We slid into a corner booth. He ordered us a round before the bartender even arrived. Somehow they knew each other already. And the first thing I noticed, now that I could actually watch him without strobe lights and smoke, was the way he paid. Every round of drinks, he pulled out a fresh $100 bill. Crispy, unbent, a little theatrical. Our drinks were never more than $20, even with tip. He tucked the change into his wallet without counting it, like math was beneath him. Guess he needed small bills. Or maybe that's just how he traveled, pockets like a cash register. I wasn't mad at it, the bartender wasn't either. He got into some personal things that surprised me for a first date, let alone a hookup situation. Not oversharing, just unguarded. He told me about an older sister who'd taught him how to tie a tie and then moved to Iceland because she likes the weather and the horses. He told me the last time he cried was on a plane watching a documentary about coral reefs. He said he rescheduled a dinner once to fly across the country for a friend's art show because showing up is a love language. Somewhere in there he admitted he can't stand bananas. The texture, he said, making a face so pure and childlike I laughed. It was nice to see he was a real person, and not just a toy for the night. Check. Between stories, he kept noticing things. The crooked picture frame behind the bar. The bartender's new tattoo, a thin line snake disappearing under the sleeve. The way the couple 3 tables over were fighting without speaking, hands stiff, shoulders turned out, phones placed screen down like shields. He took all of it in with quiet interest. "You're very observant," I said. "Occupational hazard," he replied, then caught himself and laughed. "From work," he clarified, as if work needed protection. A live trio started a slow standard, and the room seemed to exhale. I felt warm and floaty, a little dazzled, a little proud I'd picked such a good outfit for once. He set his hand on the table, palm up, casual invitation. I rested mine on top. His skin was cooler than I expected, maybe from the glass he'd been holding. He didn't squeeze, just anchored, like a promise that he was still listening even when I was the one talking. It started to get late. I did the responsible thing and started pointing him back toward his hotel. Wrap the night while we still liked each other. I made some joke about client breakfasts and 8 a.m. meetings. He nodded like he agreed, stood up, and then, smoothly, confidently, took me by the elbow and started steering us out. His fingers glided down from my elbow to lace with my fingers. Well, alrighty then. I had assumed he was interested, but now that it was confirmed, game on. We walked along the river walk again, now softer and blurred, the late-night version where everyone is either in love or about to regret something. We didn't make a big show of touching, but our shoulders bumped on purpose. He asked if I was cold. I said no. He shrugged off his jacket anyway and draped it over my shoulders like a scene from a movie that knows exactly what it's doing. His hotel was close, strategically so, I realized, now that I could see it from the bar's back exit. We crossed the lobby quickly, both of us suddenly shy in the bright lighting. The front desk clerk glanced up and then down, as if trained not to know. We behaved in the elevator, unfortunately, but there was tension in the quiet. He stood a little behind me, my back to his chest without touching, the air between us electric. The elevator stopped at floor 8, and a family got on with a toddler carrying a plush shark by the tail. We both stared straight ahead like well-behaved adults. When they got off, he caught my eye in the reflection and smiled, small, private, conspiratorial. His room was on the 14th floor. Numbers clicked under my feet in that hallway way, soft carpet swallowing footsteps, the distant ding of another elevator like a sonar ping. He opened the door with a practiced flick and guided me in with a hand at the small of my back, polite but possessive enough to make me forget my last name for a second. The room was dim and expensive in that chain hotel way, everything beige and tasteful, somehow exactly what you expected and still impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A view that made the city look like it dressed up just for us. Bridges lit like jewelry, the river a ribbon of black glass, office towers still glowing like they didn't want to be left out. It's nice to see your city from a wealthy perspective. All the problems shrink down to glitter. I wandered toward the window, pulled by it. It's a compulsion. I always check the view first. While I was taking my time admiring, I felt hands at my waist, gently but firmly reminding me that the view he had in mind was not the skyline. He rested his chin near my temple and said, "You like it?" I didn't answer. I just let the city be the only witness to 2 people deciding to stop pretending they weren't going to kiss. I'll only admit that we kept the curtains open. That was his idea. "Why would we close them?" he said lightly, as if the night itself had bought tickets. The city didn't look away, and neither did we. I won't give you details. There's a difference between a story and a diagram, but I'll say that the floor numbers in the elevator felt different after, like each one had a secret we'd stolen. Somewhere in there, I learned he had a thing about music always being on in hotel rooms. "Silence is accusatory," he said, which sounded like a line, but then he put on a playlist that was tasteful enough to be true. He kept checking his phone, not obsessively, just enough that I noticed. I chalked it up to work. He was, after all, in town for business. He set the phone face down each time like a ritual. He set my empty glass down on a coaster, precisely aligned, like even our mess had to be neat. Around 2, I realized I was starving. We debated room service versus the snack bar. He pulled open a drawer, produced a chocolate bar like a magician, and broke it into squares with studied care. "You can tell a lot about a person by whether they share the corner pieces," he said, handing me both. I pretended not to melt. We talked about nothing, the best kind of nothing, the kind that makes you feel like morning is a rumor. At some point I stepped into the bathroom to splash water on my face, and found a travel DOP kit arranged like a still life. Toothbrush, tiny cologne, razor aligned parallel like runway lights. He'd tucked in a laundry slip with neat block letters, first name only. Not uncommon, but it made him feel more temporary, like he was always almost leaving. When I came back out, he was at the window again, looking down at the river. He glanced over his shoulder and said, "You ever feel like the city's watching you back?" I laughed, but he didn't. "In a good way," he added, smiling this time, and it was easy to believe him. "I won't tell you whether I stayed until sunrise. I'll tell you that the city definitely did. I'll tell you we waved to it, or maybe it waved to us. I'll tell you the curtains stayed open. I haven't seen him since." My first Tinder experience was an all-time, insanity-filled evening. The kind of night that starts with a little swagger and ends with you staring at your ceiling like you just survived a weather event. This was back in the early days of Tinder, when the bio length was short, expectations were shorter, and most people treated "what are you up to?" like a legal contract that expired at sunrise. We agreed to meet at a local restaurant I knew well. Dim lighting, decent tacos, staff who poured generously and minded their business. I lived a few blocks away, so I got there early to settle the nerves. I grabbed a high top near the window and texted a suave, "Here, thumbs up." A few minutes later, in walked my date with a friend. "Hey, this is just for safety," she chirped, cheerful, like she'd brought a cardigan. I tried not to look surprised. The friend gave me the quick once-over, that silent scan for red flags. Eyes, shoes, whether I owned socks. They both looked younger than the age she'd listed on Tinder, fresh-faced, dewy, like they still believed in sunscreen, and my internal smoke detector beeped once. Then the server asked for IDs. They handed over their driver's licenses without a blink, both over 21. "Okay." Biggest hurdle cleared. The server even chuckled, "All good," and took our drink order. I exhaled. We started with chips and salsa and a couple of cocktails, and the banter slid into an easy groove. They were a duo in every sense, matching laughter, shared side eyes, a tag team rhythm that made it feel like I'd walked into a podcast mid-episode. Conversation got flirty, then suggestive, the way early Tinder nights did. Jokes that landed a little lower each round, fingertips that lingered an extra beat. I wasn't naive about where this might be going. I was, however, trying to be the adult in the room as the room got warmer. I ordered appetizers, then a second round. They got carded again for the drinks, new server, and produced their IDs like well-practiced magicians. We toasted to bad decisions with good intentions, and they cackled. Somewhere between "so what do you do?" and "what are you into?" We drifted into that territory, eye contact that makes the air feel charged, a kind of wordless pact forming under the table. Remember, this was the era when Tinder was mostly about chemistry plus logistics. After the plates were cleared, they looked at each other, then at me. "We could come by yours for a nightcap," one of them said, casual but intentional. The friend nodded. "Just for a bit," she added, which always means until it's not. I lived close. They'd follow in their car. Seemed simple enough. We caravanned to my place with me in front, windows cracked for the cool night air. The radio felt too loud and the silence too quiet, so I tuned to an oldie station and made a game of the red lights. They tailed me tight, like a shadow that knew where I was going better than I did. At a stop, I glanced in the rear view and caught the two of them laughing, the kind of laugh people have when they've already decided the night will be a story. We pulled into my driveway, and the electricity that had been building snapped into place. As soon as I unlocked the door, the temperature in the house rose 3 degrees. Shoes kicked off in the entry. Laughter ricocheted down the hallway. They were not just friends, and I was not surprised. The air had that fizzing quality, like champagne poured a little too fast. I showed them the living room, the kitchen. "Make yourselves at home," then walked them toward the bedroom with "I'll grab us some drinks" and a mental checklist. Music, lights, consent, condoms, water. Always water. I left them with the door half closed, went to the kitchen, and poured 3 honest drinks. My hands were steady, which was a miracle. The house felt smaller, like the walls had scooted in to watch. When I came back, the half-closed door was a suggestion, not a barrier. They were on the bed, half-dressed, laughing into each other's shoulders. The energy was playful, a little chaotic, charged in that neon way early hookups can be. I set the drinks on the dresser and took a breath. "Everybody good?" I asked, with that check-in tone that helps the room remember we're people first. Nod. Nod. Green lights all around. What followed stayed on the right side of fun. Enthusiastic, consensual, more comedic than cinematic at points. I eased into guiding the moment, so no one got lost in the momentum. At one point, I asked one of them to sit at the edge of the bed and hold her friend's ankles. We were improvising a PG-13 wrestling match, and I used soft ties on the headboard to keep wandering hands from getting in the way. Nothing wild, nothing painful, just a little don't move for a second, so I could tease without losing the plot. I kept the vibe light, checking in with a look or a laugh, always keeping an eye on the friend. Playful chaos, guardrails intact. And then, a sound cut through the room like a whistle. A phone buzzing. Then buzzing again. Then again. Not a single text, more like a notification waterfall. We paused. The friend on the edge glanced at the nightstand. Buzz. 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 I tried to be cool about it. Persistent, I joked. Tell your boyfriend to take up knitting or something. They both said, almost in unison, we don't have boyfriends. Buzz. Buzz. Okay, so who? It rang. The vibration rattled the wood. I reached over, grabbed the glowing rectangle, and handed it to the closest hand. As I passed it, my eyes flicked to the caller ID, and my stomach went cold. Not Babe. Not Liam. Not Uber. Mom and Dad. 2 contacts, both calling one after the other, overlapping, Mom and Dad. That is a multi-alarm fire. I said, eloquent. The friend took the call with a practiced, breezy hey. That did not match the situation. A voice launched into an immediate parental monologue. Her face did a slow-motion change from relaxed to caught. We're just out. It's fine, she said. A pause. What do you mean you're outside? The room tilted. I felt every molecule in my body sit up straight. Outside? As in here? The other girl grabbed her own phone, eyes darting. More buzzes, more notifications. Turns out they were roommates, friends who lived together at one of their parents' houses. They'd been on family phone plan probation for some earlier incident, and Find My Phone was not a rumor. It was a GPS blinking, steel-toed boot of a reality. The parents had driven to the dot. To my dot. I snapped, fully sober in an instant. Okay, this is over, I said, voice calm in the way only panic can make it. Get dressed. Now. No one argued. There is a special speed to getting dressed when you are very, very motivated by the idea of not meeting someone's parents half-clothed. Buttons found holes they'd never met before. Shoes found feet by sonar. As we scrambled, the parents called again. Again. Knocked. Not yet. Thank every god. The girls moved around the room in a kind of quiet, synchronized chaos, stuffing phones, grabbing bags, smoothing hair at the speed of light. I killed the music, opened the bedroom window a crack. Habit, superstition, who knows? My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my teeth. We hustled toward the door like we'd practiced it. Lights off behind us, the house suddenly an accomplice. Just go straight to your car, I whispered. If they're on the street, keep walking. Don't bring them to my porch. Do not let this become a scene. They nodded like soldiers. We opened the front door to the soft thud of late-night quiet. No one on the porch. Thank you, universe. On the sidewalk, 2 stunned parents in pajamas were scanning house numbers, arguing in that hissed, embarrassed way people do when they're too angry to be loud. The girls slipped out. Whose house is that? The dad said, pointing vaguely. Wrong house, right fear. Are their parents home? The mom snapped, to no one, to everyone, to the night. It felt like I'd woken up in a sitcom I did not audition for. I closed the door softly, locked it, turned off the last light, and leaned my forehead against the wood for a full 10 seconds. Then I paced the length of the hallway 3 times like I was wearing a groove into it. My hands were shaking. Not from guilt. I hadn't done anything illegal or unethical, but from the sheer nuclear awkwardness of almost meeting parents in the middle of a Tinder-era escapade. A cold sweat found me anyway. Through the curtains, I saw the girls reach their car, slide in, and pull away without drama. The parents stood there a second longer, confused by the moon, then got in their own car and left in a cloud of indignation. The street returned to its usual midnight murmur, sprinklers ticking somewhere, a cat performing a personal opera in the hedges. I sat on the edge of my bed and laughed. Not because it was funny, at least not yet, but because my nervous system needed an exit valve. I replayed the night in jump cuts, the IDs at the restaurant, the flirty jokes, the caravan home, the buzzer symphony, the caller ID that turned my spine into a popsicle, the "what do you mean you're outside?" line like a record scratch. I imagined a headline I did not want. Local man explains himself, 2 strangers in robes. I cleaned up the evidence of almost fun, glasses to the sink, blanket back on the bed, ties back in the drawer like they'd never seen daylight. Then I stood in the dark living room, listened to the house settle, and promised myself a sabbatical from chaos. I deleted the Tinder app that night and left the little gray X on my home screen like a scar. For a year, I told anyone who asked that I was taking a break from the scene, which was grown-up code for once I almost had to talk to someone's mom while barefoot. If there's a moral, there is, and it's wearing a reflective vest. It's this: the early Tinder era was a carnival, lights, noise, thrill rides, and the occasional surprise safety inspection. Everyone told stories about safe and boundaries, but very few of us were actually prepared for the practicalities of real-life consequences, like family plan GPS and pajama-clad parents with the investigative intensity of small-town detectives. I learned to ask better questions. Whose place do you live at? Is now on the pre-flight checklist, right after are you cool with X? And do you have any allergies? I also learned that we brought a friend for safety sometimes means we are a hurricane with matching nails. And I learned that there is no sound more sobering than a phone buzzing relentlessly in a quiet room where the vibe was 2 seconds from becoming a memory. I also learned I can move very, very quickly when motivated by the words, "We're outside." A year later, I did re-download the app, older, wiser, grayer at the temples, and with a standing house rule that if anyone's parents, parole officer, landlord, or pastor might show up mid-evening, we reschedule for literally any other time. But I still think about that night sometimes, the ridiculousness, the flirtation, the near miss. It lives in my personal anthology under comedy/horror, based on true events. A chapter punctuated by the soft click of a front door closing and the distant voice of a mother asking the moon, "Are the parents home?" Can't imagine many people will read this, but I have to mention an unforgettable experience I had using Tinder. Unforgettable in the did that really happen way that makes your friends bring it up at every party. I matched with her on a Tuesday afternoon. Her display picture was the kind that stops your thumb. Soft lighting, cheekbones you could ski down, a mask of glitter across her eyes like she'd stepped out of a music video. I assumed it was a filter or a professional shoot. Still, I sent a simple "hey," expecting it to drift into the void. When she replied within minutes, friendly, funny, using complete sentences, I had that little jolt of, oh, this might be real. We messaged for a couple days, memes, work talk, and that shallow but fun flirty lane you cruise in early on. No weird vibes, no asks for money, no click my link. She said she loved art, music, and curated chaos, which I chalked up to quirky bio speak. Then, out of the blue, she invited me to a secret masquerade ball on Saturday. Not a house party, not a regular club night, a masquerade ball. She wrote, "I can get you and a couple friends VIP wristbands, free drinks, special access." It sounded like something between a rave and a charity gala. My scam radar pinged, but curiosity won. To make sure I wasn't being duped by a very charming bot, I looked her up on Instagram so I could show my buddies. There she was, over 10K followers, a grid full of events, costumes, and collaborations with DJs I'd actually heard of. Not famous, but local influencer famous. I was impressed but not suspicious. "She's legit," I told my friends. "Seems like she's connected." 2 of my buds were in before I finished the sentence. Saturday came and we leaned into the bit. Shirts ironed, shoes cleaned, discount masks from a party store because when in Rome. The address led us to an old brick building that looked abandoned from the street, the kind of place you'd location scout for a heist film. A velvet rope, a single floodlight, and a bored bouncer reading names off a clipboard set the tone. We said our names, he found them on the VIP line like it was the most normal thing in the world, and snapped 3 wristbands on us with those brittle plastic clicks. "Down the stairs," he said, jerking his thumb. The stairs dropped us into a different century. The basement was all cement, low, repeating arches that made the ceiling feel like a catacomb. The walls had been dressed up with faux torches and wrought iron props like a medieval dungeon. The air smelled like old stone, spilled beer, and a hint of something sweet smoky, the way a candle shop smells after hours. A mask check station sat by the entrance. We pulled ours on and laughed at how ridiculous we looked. Then the bass hit my chest, and the ridiculousness faded into the vibe. I spotted her almost immediately, the Tinder girl from the photos, moving through the room like a stage manager, not a date. Clipboard in one hand, walkie-talkie clipped to her waist, eyes everywhere. She looked even more striking in person, a black half mask with sequins, a bodysuit under a sheer robe, hair pinned up with jeweled combs. We made eye contact for a half second, and I smiled, ready to wave. She breezed by, nodding at a lighting tech. Not rude, just busy. It dawned on me that I hadn't been invited to a date so much as a production. We wove our way to the VIP corral, a raised platform with a view of the dance floor, and a small bar staffed by a guy who looked like he'd invented mixology. There were 5, maybe 6 other dudes already there, sipping cocktails and doing the casual lean like they belonged. I struck up conversation with one of them, and right out of the gate he said, "You here because of her name?" I said yes. He grinned. "Same. Met her on Tinder this week." 2 other guys nodded. Lightbulb, this was less Prince Charming ball and more influencer funnel. I had a brief, deflated moment, like thinking you're in the main cast and then realizing you're part of the crowd scene. But the drinks were in fact free, the DJ was excellent, and my friends were in full let's make a memory mode. We decided to enjoy it for what it was, a strange, fun night out courtesy of the internet. The DJ had the room on a string, house into disco edits into something orchestral, and the crowd obeyed. Costumes ranged from Halloween store clearance to I own a sewing machine and a vision. At some point the lights dipped further, the music cut mid-beat, and a different sound crept in, low drums and eerie cinematic swell. The room turned toward the stage like it had been cued. She appeared, my Tinder match, now in elaborate lingerie with a jeweled harness, barefoot, eyes rimmed in metallic paint that caught the light like a cat's. Beside her, a guy in black with a shaved head and a focused expression carried a torch that threw off an athletic flame. He set up a heavy wooden table center stage, its surface glinting with something slick. A hush fell that you don't usually get in a nightclub. She climbed onto the table and reclined like a statue. He produced a metal bowl of foam, thick and pearly, the kind of thing you'd see at a chemistry show and tell, and spread it across her arms and legs with quick, practiced strokes. The scent clicked, that clean, alcohol-adjacent smell of stage fuel. A safety person in black hovered nearby with a fire blanket and a small extinguisher, calm, alert. Then the torch kissed the foam and blue-orange arcs danced across her skin. Flames curled and roared along the trails he'd laid, skimming like liquid light over her arms, her midriff, her thighs. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. The crowd collectively gasped, then hooped, then went silent again because the sight pinned you to the floor. He traced lines of fire, then snuffed them with a sweep of his palm or a damp cloth, only to relight elsewhere, building patterns like calligraphy. It was part circus, part ritual, part Vegas, executed with that unnerving precision that separates professionals from people who end up in cautionary tales. I felt the oddest mix of things, adrenaline, awe, and this very specific, very comedic awareness that I had been catfished, not into romance but into attendance. She wasn't pretending to be someone else. She'd just omitted the part where I was a warm body boosting her event's energy. Standing there with a VIP wristband and a free drink, watching my would-be date turn herself into a human candle, I couldn't exactly claim harm. But it was a lesson wearing sequins. The act ended with a flourish, her arching up into a final bloom of flame that blew out in a soft whoosh as the room exhaled, and then the lights shifted back to club mode like nothing had happened. She slid off the table, bowed with the torch guy, and disappeared behind a curtain, instantly back to business, headset on, clipboard up. The DJ launched into an ecstatic anthem, and the dance floor erupted like someone had pressed unpause on a video game. My friends were buzzing. Dude. One of them mimed flames with his hands. The other declared it the coolest bait and switch he'd ever witnessed. We toasted to being used for marketing and kept the inside jokes rolling. Every time she passed by, corralling a vendor or cueing a lighting change, we lifted our glasses in a half salute. She didn't see us, which honestly was part of the charm now. We were extras in her movie. Well, I think this is rather strange. Not alien abduction strange. More like the kind of night you replay on the tram home, mouthing alternative lines you should have delivered. We matched on Tinder, chatted a bit, discovered we both preferred red wine to white, Cabernet over Chardonnay, tannins over acidity, you know the type, and set a plan. We'd meet in town during the light festival in Ulu, wander under glowing installations like cultured moths, and see if conversation survived the wind off the Bothnian Bay. We did meet, technically, but we didn't see a single light piece. It was February cold, the sort of air that makes your eyelashes feel armored, so we ducked into the first warm bar with fogged windows and never left. 2 glasses of something Spanish later, the lights could have been fireworks, and I wouldn't have known. She was dry-witted, the kind of person who smiles with one half of the mouth first. We compared favorite roasteries, traded minor complaints about winter cycling, studded tires or bust, and agreed that white wine tastes like someone apologized for grapes. Somewhere between glass 2 and 3, we made a grown-up plan. Next date at her place. We'd cook together, then sauna. Her place specifically because she had a sauna and I didn't, and because, as everyone knows, asking a Finn to skip a sauna is like asking a priest to skip Massachusetts. She also warned me about her pets. The dog was, in her words, suspicious by nature, while the cat thinks every stranger is its long-lost lawyer. I arrived with a backpack full of groceries and the hopeful competence of a YouTube chef. The dog met me at the door and did exactly what she'd promised, a low, professional growl that said, "State your business." I crouched, turned slightly sideways, offered a hand for sniff approval, and spoke in politest dog, soft, silly, vowel-rich. 5 minutes later he was upside down, legs bicycling the air, belly exposed like a surrendered fortress. The cat, meanwhile, gave me the look of a maitre d' deciding whether my shoes met the dress code, then butted his head into my shin as if to say, "He'll do." As planned, by which I mean I cooked. She poured wine, put on a playlist that sounded like melancholy glaciers, and leaned on the counter asking the kind of questions that make time hop. Where I grew up, the smell of my grandmother's kitchen, whether I think cilantro tastes like soap, I do not. I'm not cursed. I made garlic butter salmon with roasted potatoes, and a salad too earnest to be delicious. She chopped dill with an alarming, professional confidence. Every so often the dog would materialize, hopeful, then remember he was suspicious and retreat 3 steps to maintain mystery. Then sauna time. If you haven't done it the Finnish way, know this. It is both very simple and very sacred. You wash, you sit, you breathe heat. Nakedness is incidental, steam is the point. We stepped in, skin prickling, the cedar bench warm against calves and palms. The Kiwas hummed. She tossed a ladle of water onto the rocks, and the loily rose in a soft, aggressive wave, like being hugged by weather. Conversation thinned the way it does when breathing becomes an activity. We sat in companionable silence, sweat turning into a second skin. I rubbed her back, slow, friendly, respectful, because that seemed welcome, and because, as any Finn will tell you, the sauna is not for sex. There are ancient Nordic gods to respect, and at least one of them is very judgmental about mixing rituals. We took cold rinses between rounds, laughing at our own yelps. Round 2 was quieter. You learn a person's rhythms in the sauna, how they pour water, where they look, how long they sit before stepping out for cool air. Hers said steady, mine said trying not to be eager. And I kept it there, bases were unattempted. The church rule stands. After we ate, sauna hunger is real and absurd. Everything tastes like victory. We sat at her small table with fogged windows and dripping hair, 2 people comfortably exhausted, passing the dill like it was contraband. The dog, whose suspicion had evolved into a professional relationship with my fork, positioned himself at a respectful yet strategic angle. The cat did laps around our ankles, purring like a tiny engine. Eventually, it was time to take the dog out. We layered up and walked the dark, squeaky snow sidewalks, breath puffing in steady puffs. Oulu in winter can feel like the world pared down to essentials. A few street lamps, a few footsteps, the occasional cyclist with a light like a comet. We didn't talk much. It was a simple, domestic loop, dog sniffing the same heroic patch of snow, us waiting, hands in pockets, nodding at other bundled silhouettes doing the same. It felt nice. It felt promising. Back inside, I packed my cooking gear into my backpack, knife wrapped in tea towel, spice jars clinking, and she asked, "Are you leaving?" I said, with all the finesse of a man trying to be both considerate and not dense, that it was her decision. She nodded in a way that could have meant anything and sat on the arm of the sofa. Here's the pivot. I suggested we take our clothes off again and go to bed. No leering, no grab, just the sentence, a question mark implied. I thought I was reading the room, sauna, dinner, dog walk, the easy quiet. In my head, I'd written us a reasonable third act. In hers, I later realized, the sauna was church, dinner was fellowship, the dog walk was intermission, and the credits were rolling. She went very still, then stood up, walked to the balcony, and lit a cigarette. The door clicked behind her. I watched the orange tip flare and move, a metronome for the long seconds where I tried to rewind and edit reality. When she came back in, she didn't sit. She said, carefully and not unkindly, "You have to leave." Which I did, of course. I put on my boots slowly, to give apologies somewhere to land. I said I was sorry for upsetting her, that I misunderstood, that I'd had a good time. The dog escorted me to the door like a security guard who'd grown fond of a trespasser. The cat blinked once, inscrutable. Snow squeaked under my steps all the way to the tram. At home, I sent a quick message. Another apology, simple, no defense, no bargaining. By morning, she'd already unmatched me. Efficient, Scandinavian closure. I respect it, even if it stung. Here's where I land now, after the embarrassment cooled and the story turned into something I can tell without flinching. It was absolutely her right to kick me out at any time. A yes to dinner and sauna is not a yes to bed, and a back rub in 80 degrees Celsius air is not consent to anything beyond that feels nice. The sauna really is church. I should have treated the evening like a service that ends when the lights come up. So it was October, bloody cold, and I was on a dating app in Salem, Massachusetts. Of course I was bound to match with someone who was overly into spooky stuff, classic this time of year. But I'll be honest, Greg seemed harmless enough. His profile was quirky in that New England hipster way. Lots of flannel, a picture of him holding a cup of pumpkin spice coffee, and another of him standing in front of the witch house. I thought, he's leaning into the Salem vibe. That's okay. I wasn't a die-hard Halloween person, but I loved the history and charm of Salem. After some back-and-forth messaging about our favorite horror movies, he was Team The Shining, I was Team Scream. Greg suggested we meet at the Salem Witch Museum. It seemed like a safe, public place for a first date, and I was excited to get into the fall spirit. When I showed up, Greg was waiting outside, wearing a long black coat and a scarf. He had shaggy brown hair, a slight beard, and the kind of glasses that made him look like he spent too much time in libraries. "Hey, you must be Claire," he said, flashing a crooked smile. "Yep, that's me," I replied. The museum was packed with tourists, which made sense given the time of year. We wandered through the exhibits, making small talk about Salem history and laughing at some of the overly dramatic mannequins depicting the witch trials. Greg seemed nice, if a little intense. But then, as we were leaving, he said, "I have something even cooler to show you. My apartment's just around the corner." Now, I know what you're thinking. Don't go to a guy's apartment on the first date. And normally I wouldn't. But it was the middle of the day, and we were in downtown Salem. The area was bustling with people, and his offer sounded innocent enough. Plus, I was curious. "What's at your apartment?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Greg grinned. "A piece of Salem history. You'll love it." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We walked a few blocks to a brick building that looked like it had been around since the 1800s. Greg led me up a narrow staircase to his apartment, which was surprisingly clean and smelled faintly of cinnamon. "This way," he said, gesturing toward a door at the end of the hallway. When he opened it, I froze. The room was filled with antique dolls. They were everywhere, lining the shelves, sitting on the furniture, even hanging from the walls. Some were porcelain, others were raggedy, and a few looked like they might have been handmade centuries ago. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow me as I stepped inside. "Welcome to my collection," Greg said, beaming like a proud parent. I laughed nervously, thinking this had to be a joke. "Wow, this is a lot of dolls." "They're not just dolls," he said, picking up one with a cracked porcelain face and a frilly dress. "Each one has a story." "Of course they do," I muttered, trying to hide my discomfort. Greg placed the doll back on the shelf and grabbed another one, this one missing an eye. "This is Annabelle," he said. "Like the movie?" I asked, clutching my purse. "No, the movie's fake," he said, shaking his head. "But this Annabelle? She's real. She's from the 1800s. Legend has it, she was owned by a little girl who—" "Okay, you know what?" I interrupted, backing toward the door. "I just remembered I have to, go feed my cat." Greg frowned, clearly disappointed. "You don't have a cat?" "Right, well, I have to check my email," I said, reaching for the doorknob. "Wait," he said, stepping in front of me. "I haven't even shown you the haunted ones yet." "The what ones?" "The haunted ones," he repeated, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "This one," he said, picking up a doll with a chipped nose, "is supposedly cursed. Every time someone touches it, something bad happens." "Great," I said, forcing a smile. "Well, I'd better leave before I accidentally touch it." "Claire, come on," Greg said, his tone pleading. "You're not scared, are you?" "No, I'm just busy," I said, practically yanking the door open. "Thanks for the tour, though." I bolted down the stairs, my heart racing. As I reached the street, I swore I heard a faint giggle behind me. I didn't look back. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Greg. "I hope you're okay," it read. Why wouldn't I be? I replied, confused. You left so quickly, he said. Sometimes the dolls don't like that. I stared at my phone, debating whether or not to respond. Finally, I typed, very funny, and hit send. But Greg wasn't joking. They're protective, he wrote. Especially Annabelle. Okay, I am out of here. See you never, Greg. It started with a voice, not hers but mine. I'd matched with a woman named Cerelia one late Friday night after a long work week and 2 glasses of wine. Her profile was a mix of contradictions. Photos of her dressed in earth-tone linen standing in a forest, followed by a picture of her in a glittering cocktail dress on a rooftop bar. Her bio read, poet, linguist, collector of voices. I believe the throat holds more truth than the eyes. I had no idea what that meant, but I was intrigued. I swiped right. We matched instantly. Her first message came 5 minutes later. Do you like the sound of your own voice? It caught me off guard. I reread it 3 times. I had expected a hello, a compliment, maybe a joke. But this? It felt like a test. I replied, I'm not sure. I've never really thought about it. She sent back, you should. It's the first instrument you ever learned. Most people forget that. Okay, so she was definitely different. Our conversation unfolded with a rhythm I wasn't used to. She didn't ask what I did for work or where I lived. Instead, she asked about the last time I screamed, whether I sang in the shower, if I'd ever tried to hum underwater. She told me she'd once gone an entire week without speaking, just to see how it would alter her perception of sound. I found her fascinating, though a little intense. We exchanged voice notes instead of texts for most of that weekend. Hers was soft, measured, and deliberate. She spoke like someone reading a bedtime story to a room of strangers, calm but mysterious. I didn't love the sound of my own voice, but she did. You speak like someone who's always listening for an answer, she said once. It's beautiful. By Sunday, she asked if I wanted to meet in person. I agreed, though I wasn't sure what I was walking into. She chose the location, a sound bath session hosted in a converted greenhouse on the edge of the city. I'd never been to a sound bath before and had to Google it. I figured it would be awkward but interesting. At the very least, I'd have a story to tell. When I arrived, she was waiting outside, dressed in a flowing pewter-colored wrap and barefoot. Her hair was braided down her back in a single long plait, and she wore no makeup, but her skin glowed with the kind of confidence that didn't need accessories. Hello, she said, smiling. Hi, I replied, feeling suddenly overdressed in jeans and a button-down. She took my hand without asking and led me inside. The space was warm and dim, with soft lights scattered among plants and cushions. A woman played a singing bowl in the corner, and somewhere in the back, a wind chime echoed faintly. We lay side by side on yoga mats while the facilitator guided us through sound meditation, bowls, gongs, gentle hums. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel, but I tried to stay open. Afterward, she looked over at me and whispered, "You breathe like someone with a lot of withheld syllables." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. We went for tea afterward, and I expected her to ask what I thought about the session, but she didn't. Instead, she asked if I wanted to see her apartment. I paused. It was early in the evening, and I wasn't sure where she wanted things to go. But she didn't seem like someone looking for a hookup. She felt curated, like a performance you didn't interrupt with assumptions. Sure, I said. Her apartment was in a narrow building above a reflexologist studio. The hallway leading to her door was lined with mirrors, and even before she opened the door, I could hear soft chanting coming from inside. She let me in and closed the door behind us. Her apartment was dimly lit, filled with tapestries, candles, and shelves stacked with antique radios, recorders, microphones, and dozens of cassettes labeled in small, neat handwriting. "What is all this?" I asked, stepping carefully around the coiled cords and wooden boxes. "My archive," she said. "I collect voices." I turned toward her. "Voices?" She nodded. "I record people. Not just interviews. I ask them things they don't usually say out loud. Fears. Secrets. Words they've never spoken before. Then I archive them. I listen to them when I write." She gestured toward a small writing desk covered in notebooks and cassette decks. "It helps me understand the human throat," she said. "So much language gets lost in the body." I tried to process that. She walked over to a shelf and pulled out a tape labeled as September 2022. She slid it into a player, pressed play. A man's voice filled the room. Shaky quiet. "I never told anyone. I used to pray to be invisible. Not metaphorically. I really wanted to vanish. She let it play for a minute, then stopped it. "That was a bus driver I met at a retreat," she said. "He let me record him after we shared a meal in silence." I wasn't sure what to say. She looked at me then and asked, "May I record you?" I laughed. "Right now?" She nodded. "Just your voice. Nothing visual. Just a few questions. You don't have to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable." I hesitated. It felt strange, intimate, but also, I was curious. I'd never been asked to do something like that before. "Okay," I said. She led me to a floor cushion near her desk, lit a candle between us, and took out a small vintage microphone. She pressed record. "What is a sound you miss?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "My grandmother's laugh," I said. It was high-pitched and kind of unfiltered. She used to laugh with her whole face. She nodded. "What's something you've never said out loud before?" I blinked. "That's a big one." "You can pause," she said. "Or skip." I thought hard. Finally, I said, "I'm afraid of becoming ordinary." I matched with a guy named Jaspin on a Wednesday afternoon during my lunch break. His photos were clean and minimal, one of him standing beside a bicycle on a foggy trail, another of him in a crisp white shirt holding a plant, and the last one was just a close-up of his eye with a reflection of the sky in it. It was a little artsy, a little pretentious, but not in a way that made me roll my eyes. His bio read, "Part-time herbalist, full-time question-asker. I believe in rituals, clean eating, and honesty." I hesitated for a second. Something about the phrase part-time herbalist made me think of someone who might try to sell me on essential oils to fix my anxiety. But he was cute, and I was curious, so I swiped right. He matched with me instantly. His first message was, "What's one thing you know you'll never grow tired of?" I appreciated that it wasn't a generic "hey" or "how's your day?" I responded, "Rain." I could listen to it for hours, especially at night. He wrote back, "Same. It's nature's lullaby. Do you listen to it with your window open or closed?" And just like that, we were off. Jaspin was a good conversationalist. He had a poetic way of phrasing things that made even simple topics sound a little more enchanting. He told me he worked at a holistic wellness center part-time, helped manage a local apothecary, and was studying for a certification in nutritional science. He had a calmness to him, like someone who had done a lot of yoga and was very aware of his breath at all times. He talked about balance, energy, the healing power of certain teas. I wasn't sure how much of it I bought into, but I liked how grounded he seemed. We talked for a few days before planning our first date, a walk through the botanical gardens followed by tea at a cafe he recommended. I'd never been to that part of the city before, and I liked the idea of doing something other than sitting across from someone in a dimly lit restaurant, trying to make awkward small talk over overpriced appetizers. He showed up exactly on time, wearing a moss green jacket, a scarf, and a look of serene attentiveness. His voice in person was softer than I expected, almost like a whisper, but his presence was solid. He moved slowly, deliberately, like time bent slightly around him. The date was actually really enjoyable. We walked through the gardens, and he pointed out plants by name, explaining their properties. He told me about mugwort, valerian root, and why he believed basil could help with memory. I listened, intrigued even when I didn't fully understand. When we sat down for tea, he ordered a custom blend, something with hibiscus, cinnamon bark, and rose petals. I ordered a chai. He asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully, nodding and holding eye contact in a way that was intense but not uncomfortable. We ended the date with a hug, and he asked if we could meet again soon. I said yes. Date 2 happened 3 days later. This time, he invited me over to his apartment for dinner. He said he wanted to cook for me, a plant-based meal with intentional ingredients. I was a little hesitant. I don't usually go to someone's home that early in the dating process, but he had given me no red flags so far. He seemed respectful, earnest, and very non-threatening. Plus, I was curious to see what kind of space a person like Jaspin lived in. His apartment was exactly what I expected, and yet somehow weirder. The air smelled like sage and citrus. There were crystals on nearly every surface, clusters of amethyst, smoky quartz, and one massive chunk of rose-colored stone near the entrance. Plants hung from the ceiling, climbed up bookshelves, and spilled from windowsills. The lighting was soft and golden, and there was ambient instrumental music playing softly in the background. "Take off your shoes," he said gently. "Let the floor greet you." Okay, I thought. A little odd, but fine. Dinner was surprisingly good. A mushroom stew with lentils, spiced rice, and a salad with some kind of nut-based dressing. He served everything in mismatched bowls, and we ate on floor cushions at a low wooden table. We talked about childhood dreams, what we thought about when we couldn't sleep, and whether we believed the moon actually affected our moods. I felt comfortable. Not giddy, not butterflies in my stomach excited, just peacefully curious. After dinner, he asked if I wanted to see his personal project. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of project? He smiled. Something I work on every day. It's a bit unconventional, but it's part of how I track my health. He led me to a small room at the back of the apartment. It looked like a study, part library, part apothecary. Shelves lined with dried herbs, notebooks, and glass jars. He pulled open a drawer in a wooden cabinet and revealed a black leather-bound binder. Inside were neatly arranged plastic sleeves, like the kind used to hold trading cards. Each sleeve contained a small, labeled vial. Each vial was filled with liquid. "This," he said with quiet pride, "is my urine journal." I blinked. "Your what?" "My urine journal," he repeated. "I collect a vial every morning and note its color, consistency, and scent. It's one of the best ways to monitor internal shifts, hydration, nutrient absorption, kidney function. You'd be amazed what your body tells you when you learn to listen." He flipped through several pages, showing me vials of varying shades, pale yellow, amber, one that looked alarmingly dark. "I've been doing this for 2 years," he said. "Every day without fail." I didn't know what to say. My brain was trying to catch up with my eyes. "That's really dedicated," I managed. "It's data," he said earnestly. "Real, personal health data. So many people ignore the signs their body gives them. But I listen." He looked at me then, like he expected admiration. Or maybe awe. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral. "That's really something." He smiled and carefully closed the binder, placing it back in the drawer. "I don't show that to everyone," he said. "But you seemed open." I gave a half smile. "Thanks for trusting me with it." We sat in silence for a moment, and I realized I was gripping my knees a little too tightly. Eventually, I stood up and said I should probably get going. He walked me to the door, gave me a long, quiet hug, and said he'd love to see me again. I nodded, smiled, and left. Back in my car, I sat for a while, staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't scared. I didn't think he was dangerous. But I felt unsettled. Not just because of the urine journal, though that was definitely a part of it, but because of how normal he made it seem. How comfortable he was sharing something so intensely personal, bordering on medical, as if it were a photo album. I tried to rationalize it. People have weird hobbies. Some people collect taxidermy. Others hoard vintage dolls. Maybe this was just his thing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just the act, it was the context. He'd shared it not as an odd quirk or as something funny, but as a core part of his identity. He was proud of it. It was something he expected me to admire. And I couldn't. I didn't text him that night. Or the next. He messaged me a few times, gentle check-ins, polite thinking of you notes. I responded briefly, then faded out. I didn't owe him a confrontation. I didn't want to shame him. But I also knew I couldn't date someone who collected bodily fluids like they were rare coins. I met Semric through Tinder. His profile didn't stand out much, 3 photos, all selfies, and a bio that said, "Looking for something really real." No games. Just honesty. Normally, that last bit would have been enough for me to swipe left. Guys who write no games are often the ones who play the most, but I was in a generous mood. We matched, and he messaged me first. "Hi, I love your smile. It feels safe." A little odd, but not terrible. We started chatting. He asked about my job, my favorite films, whether I preferred dogs or cats. Vanilla stuff. He was polite. Not particularly witty or insightful, but kind enough. I wasn't swooning, but I wasn't repulsed either. He suggested grabbing a drink sometime soon, and I said yes. I figured, why not? A casual drink wouldn't kill me. We met on a Thursday night at a quiet little bar tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. He showed up right on time, wearing a navy sweater and scuffed brown boots. He was shorter than I expected, and his voice was gentler than it had sounded in our messages, almost childlike. He smiled a lot. Too much. He hugged me the moment we met. Not a quick, polite hug, a long, lingering one that made me subtly pull back. "Wow," he said, holding onto my shoulders. "You're even prettier in person." I smiled, murmured a thank you, and signaled toward the bar. We sat and ordered drinks, gin and tonic for me, something herbal for him. I asked about his week. He told me his coworkers were energy vampires, but that he tried to stay positive by listening to meditation tracks during lunch. I nodded politely. He asked about my hobbies, and I mentioned painting and yoga. He said, "I love that. You seem very grounded." The conversation was fine. Not electric, but not a disaster. I knew within 20 minutes that there wasn't a spark, but I also knew I'd stay for one drink, be polite, and bow out gracefully. Except Semric had other plans. About halfway through the drink, he reached across the table and touched my hand. "I'm really glad I met you," he said softly. "I had a feeling about tonight." I smiled awkwardly and gently pulled my hand away. "It's nice to meet you too." When I finished my drink, I checked the time and said I needed to head out. Early meeting the next day. "No problem," he said. "I'll walk you to your car." I tried to decline, but he insisted. I didn't want to make a scene, so I let him. The walk was short, and I made sure to keep a bit of space between us. When we reached my car, he stepped closer and said, "Would it be too soon to say I feel something here?" I blinked. I think it's a little early to tell, but it was nice meeting you." He nodded, eyes wide. Yeah, totally. I get it. I don't meet people like you often. You have a calm energy. It's rare." I gave a small smile, opened my car door and said, "Take care, Semric." He texted me before I even pulled out of the parking lot. "Thank you for tonight. I feel lighter now." Then again, 5 minutes later. I'm still smiling. That has to mean something, right? I didn't respond right away. I usually wait until the next day to send a polite, "thanks again" message if I'm not feeling the connection. But Semric didn't wait. By the time I got home, maybe 30 minutes later, I had 5 more texts. All variations of "I really like you," "I feel like I can breathe around you," and one that said, "I think our souls recognize each other. Did you feel it too?" That one made me pause. I typed out a response carefully. "Hey, thank you for tonight. You're very kind, but I didn't feel a romantic connection. I wish you the best though." I hit send. No reply. An hour passed. Then 2. At midnight, I got his response. "Wow. Okay. I thought you were different. I opened up to you. I don't usually do that. Then, I guess I was wrong. Again. Then, you know what? Forget it. I hope your early meeting goes well." I didn't reply. The next morning, I woke up to a wall of texts, some apologizing, some accusing. "I'm sorry. I was just hurt. You led me on. You're like all the others. I'll never understand why women pretend to be nice. We had a moment. I know we did." I blocked his number. I told myself it was over. It wasn't. The following Monday, I walked into work and noticed 2 of my co-workers whispering near the espresso machine. They stopped when I walked by. I brushed it off. But during lunch, my friend Nira slid into the seat across from me and said, "Did you go out with someone named Semric?" I froze. "Why?" She looked uncomfortable. "He messaged me on Facebook. Said he was your new boyfriend and that you ghosted him after sleeping together." My stomach dropped. "What?" She showed me the message. It was long, rambling, full of half-truths and lies. He claimed I'd used him, that I was emotionally manipulative, and that he was reaching out to people in her life so they can see the real her. He'd messaged 3 of my co-workers. He even found my cousin on Instagram. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I didn't even kiss this man. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was spiraling. I spent the afternoon on edge, waiting for another shoe to drop. That evening I checked my LinkedIn. He'd viewed my profile. Then my Facebook. He'd commented on an old post from months ago with a vague quote. "Some people are great actors." I reported and blocked him everywhere I could think of. Then came the DMs from people I didn't know. "Hey, is it true you slept with that guy and ghosted him? He's saying some wild stuff about you. Just thought you should know." I was humiliated. I felt exposed. I started showing up to work early and leaving late just to avoid running into anyone. I deleted social media apps from my phone. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep. It had been one drink, one polite evening, one firm but respectful boundary, and this was the fallout. I considered contacting a lawyer, but nothing he'd said was technically illegal. Just cruel, vindictive, designed to chip away at my peace. After a week, the messages stopped, but the damage lingered. I'd bump into someone at work, and I could feel them wondering. I heard whispers. I felt the judgment, even if it wasn't spoken. I couldn't prove anything, but I knew. I knew what he'd planted, and I hated that I had no way to undo it. I started questioning everything. Was I too nice? Should I have left the date earlier? Should I have been colder? Sharper? Less polite? But no, that wasn't the answer. The problem wasn't me. It was him. Semric wasn't heartbroken. He was entitled. He believed kindness was a contract, that a woman's time was a promise. That rejection was betrayal. I was just the latest target of his narrative. Eventually things calmed down. People moved on. Work returned to normal. But I didn't forget, and I haven't been on Tinder since then. I met Paul on a Thursday evening after work. He had one of those charming, slightly crooked smiles in every photo and a profile that read, "Tech consultant by day, amateur ukulele player by night. Looking for someone who laughs from the belly." He seemed warm, clever in a humble way. His messages were thoughtful, never pushy. He asked good questions, stayed away from cliches, and didn't try to force anything. We messaged for about a week before he asked if I'd like to grab a drink. "Nothing fancy," he said. "Just a corner bar, decent music, and a chance to talk without autocorrect getting in the way." So I said yes. We agreed to meet at a place called the Green Lantern, a casual bar tucked between an art gallery and a coffee shop. I'd been there once before with co-workers. It had dim lighting, cheap beer, and a surprisingly good playlist. I arrived 5 minutes early. Paul was already there, seated at the bar with 2 drinks in front of him. "Hey," he said, standing up to greet me. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I took a wild guess. "Whiskey ginger?" I smiled. "Lucky guess." We sat down. The conversation was easy enough. He talked a little about his job, something to do with cloud security, and I talked about mine, which involved more spreadsheets than I cared to admit. He was good at listening. Not just nodding, but really listening. He complimented my laugh. I remember that because it was the last part of the night that felt normal. About 20 minutes in, I excused myself to the restroom. When I came back, he was scrolling through his phone, our drinks untouched. I took a sip of mine and he smiled. "Still good?" I nodded. "Yeah, thanks again." But something felt off. The taste of the drink hadn't changed, but I suddenly felt lightheaded. Not dizzy exactly, just detached. Like the air had thickened around me, and I was moving through it slower than everyone else. My fingers tingled. My mouth felt dry. I tried to focus on what Paul was saying, but his words started to blur together. My heart began to race, not like anxiety, but like my body was sending out a flare. I blinked hard. That's when I saw her. A woman, 3 tables down, was staring at me. Not casually, not with curiosity. She was watching me intently. Eye contact unwavering. And then she shook her head. Once. Firmly. I blinked again. Was I imagining that? Paul turned to grab a napkin, and the woman mouthed something to me silently. "Don't drink it." I froze. The edges of the room were starting to blur. My limbs felt heavy, like someone had draped wet towels over them. My instincts screamed through the fog. I stood up suddenly. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, and Paul looked startled. "Everything okay?" he asked. "I need the restroom," I mumbled, already moving. Once inside the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. I texted the only person I knew was nearby. Emma. She was my best friend, and she'd been the first one I told about this date. I hadn't even told her the guy's name, just that I was going out, and where. "Me, something's wrong. I think he drugged me." "Me, at Green Lantern. In the bathroom." "Me, please come." I stared at the screen, praying I had typed it right. My vision was starting to dull at the edges. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. "Emma, I'm here. I'm the one who warned you." I stared at the message. "What?" "Emma, I saw him. I recognized him from before. I had a bad feeling. I followed you in. Stay put." I felt my knees buckle and sank to the floor. Emma was here? How? I didn't even tell her his name. A minute later, there was a knock. "It's me," came Emma's voice, muffled but unmistakably hers. "Open the door." I unlocked it, and she slipped inside, locking it behind her. She crouched beside me. "You're okay," she whispered. "I've got you." I couldn't stop shaking. She handed me a bottle of water and helped me sip. "He's still out there. I don't think he knows I'm here with you. I told the bartender you needed help. He's calling an ambulance." I tried to speak, but my mouth felt thick. Emma held my hand. "I saw him last month," she said quietly. "Same bar. He was with another girl." She looked off. I didn't know what to do. "But when I saw him again tonight with you." She didn't finish the sentence. The paramedics came. I don't remember much after that. They took a sample. Confirmed later that there were traces of benzodiazepines, something fast-acting. Something slipped into my drink while I was in the bathroom. The police took a report. Paul was gone by the time they arrived. But the bartender remembered him. Security footage caught his face. They matched it to a name. He hadn't used Paul on the app. His real name was something else, Jaron, with a record in another city. 2 dropped charges. Allegations that never made it to court. I gave a statement. So did Emma. I never saw him again. It's been months since that night. I still think about it. I still feel my body go cold when I pass that bar. I still check every drink I'm handed, at restaurants, at parties, even at my own apartment. I've replayed the night over and over. The moment I sipped the drink. The way Emma looked at me. The realization that my body was shutting down before I even understood what was happening. And I think about what would have happened if Emma hadn't been there. If she hadn't followed her gut. If she hadn't recognized his face. Would I have woken up somewhere I didn't recognize? Would I have woken up at all? I can't say. But I know this. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it compliments your laugh. Sometimes it offers you a whiskey ginger and seems like the safest person in the room. And sometimes, survival looks like a quiet woman at the next table mouthing the words that save your life. I never reported it online. I didn't post his face. I didn't want the attention. But I tell people now. Not to scare them, but because we need to look out for each other. Because the moment you feel something's off, it probably is. And because sometimes someone else sees what you don't. I still go on dates. But I meet in public. I order my own drinks. I keep my eyes open. Picture this. I'm sprawled on my couch, half-heartedly scrolling through Tinder, while some Netflix show I've seen twice drones on in the background. Swipe left, swipe left, swipe left, nothing worth stopping for. I'm about to give up when I see her. She has one of those perfectly imperfect smiles, like she knows a secret joke, but might share it if you're lucky. Her bio reads, professional pizza enthusiast. Certified blanket fort builder. It's quirky but not trying too hard. Something about her feels different. Different sounded good that night. Different sounded like exactly what I needed. Now, I'm not the type to throw out some generic hey as an opener. I spend a solid 5 minutes crafting the perfect message. It had to be clever but not too much, playful without coming off as desperate. Finally, I settle on, do you believe in love at first swipe, or should I message you again? I hit send and immediately start overthinking it. But to my surprise, she replies, and not with some half-hearted response. She matches my energy joke for joke, and suddenly we're talking about everything. Our mutual hatred of celery, our love of trashy reality TV, even the obscure bands we both pretended to know way too much about. I couldn't believe how easy it was to talk to her. This never happens, right? Except it was happening. That's when my inner sleuth kicked in. See, I've watched enough catfish to know better than to take someone at face value online. So like any responsible millennial, I did a little digging. It wasn't creepy. I'm not talking about hiring a private investigator or anything. But I Googled her name and tried to find her on social media. That's when I hit my first roadblock. She didn't have a Facebook. At all. I mean, who doesn't have Facebook? I casually brought it up during one of our chats, and she just laughed. Oh, I never use it, she said. Fair enough, I thought. Some people are off the grid. But something about it didn't sit right. I asked for her last name, just to see if it would lead anywhere. And that's when suddenly she did have a Facebook. The profile was sketchy as hell. No posts older than a week, only 5 photos total, and all of them looked like stock images of a girl living her best life. Her name sounded straight out of a spy movie. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a scam. But then she sent me this goofy meme about pizza toppings, and my brain went, she can't be that bad, right? I convinced myself to let it go. She was probably just weird, and weird wasn't necessarily bad. So when she suggested meeting up, I agreed. She picked a bar halfway between where she said she lived and where I lived. It seemed like a reasonable choice, public, busy, and neutral ground. But as I was driving there, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that I was walking into a setup. My overactive imagination painted a vivid picture. I'd walk in, and instead of meeting her, I'd get jumped by some sketchy group of Russian dudes she was working with. Just to be safe, I stopped at an ATM on the way and deposited all my cash. It felt a little paranoid, but I wasn't about to take chances. When I got to the bar, there she was. She looked just like her profile pictures, and for a second, all my doubts melted away. She smiled, waved, and even gave me a quick hug. Everything seemed fine, until she said, "This place is a little crowded. Let's go somewhere else." It felt like a trap. Who changes locations on a first date? But she was already heading for the door, and I didn't want to seem rude. As we walked to the next bar, I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting a gang of thugs to jump out of the shadows. Nothing happened. We made it to the second bar, got a couple of drinks, and sat down to talk. At first, I was still on edge. Every part of me screamed, "Be suspicious." But as the conversation flowed, I started to relax. She was funny, sharp, and just the right amount of weird. We talked for hours, about everything from travel plans to our favorite childhood cartoons. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misjudged her. And then she brought up pizza. "There's this amazing pizza place across the street," she said. Her eyes lit up as she described it, and I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. By then I was a little tipsy, so when she suggested going, I agreed. But as we were leaving the bar, she suddenly stopped and said, "Actually, let's go somewhere else. There's an even better pizza place, like 15 blocks away." 15 blocks. It was freezing outside, and I wasn't exactly dressed for a hike. But she had this infectious energy, like this pizza place was going to change my life. Against my better judgment, I followed her. By the time we got there, I couldn't feel my fingers or toes, and I was starting to wonder if she was messing with me. The pizza? It was fine. Not life-changing. Not even great. Just pizza. I didn't say anything, though, because she seemed genuinely happy about it. After we ate, she suggested hitting one more bar. I should have said no. I should have gone home. But for some reason, I said yes. At the third bar, the conversation took a deeper turn. She told me she'd just gotten out of a 4-year relationship, like days before we matched on Tinder. I could tell it was still fresh for her, and while part of me wanted to run, another part wanted to stay. She was messy, sure, but there was something about her I couldn't walk away from. At one point, she leaned in and kissed me. My brain immediately started panicking. This was way too fast, wasn't it? I barely knew her, and the night had been a roller coaster of suspicion and surprise. But something about the way she smiled at me afterward made me think, maybe this is worth it. When the night ended, I was sure I'd never hear from her again. It felt too weird, too chaotic. But the next morning, she texted me, "Last night was fun. Let's do it again sometime." That was a year ago. She wasn't a spy or a scammer, just a delightfully weird person who didn't care about following anyone's rules but her own. Since then, we've been inseparable. Every now and then, I bring up all the red flags I had to ignore to keep dating her, and she just laughs. "You didn't have to follow me to that second pizza place," she teases. But honestly, I'd follow her anywhere, even if it's 15 blocks in the freezing cold for mediocre pizza. Let me set the scene. I'm a stressed out, overworked college student in need of some kind of social distraction when Tinder first came onto the scene. Back then, it wasn't the meme-laden wasteland it's sometimes known for now. It felt shiny, new, and promising. You'd swipe, match, and maybe, just maybe, you'd hit the jackpot and meet someone who didn't start every sentence with WID. That's exactly what happened when I matched with her. Let's call her Bae. She was a paramedic, and her bio was like a magnet for my attention. Sharp, funny, and so real it practically screamed this is not a drill. For once, I wasn't nervous about opening the conversation. She seemed cool, and I threw out something playful. To my surprise, she responded right away. From there, the messages flew back and forth. I was quick-witted and hilarious, the kind of person who could turn any mundane story into a full-blown comedy special. We bonded over everything, the absurdity of our schedules, her paramedic shifts, my school and work chaos, the misery of waking up before the sun, and our shared appreciation for memes so bad they looped back around to being genius. Over the days we chatted, I found myself actually looking forward to hearing that little notification ding on my phone. This felt different. She had a thing, though. Playfully, but also a little too often, she'd ask, "You're not sketchy, are you? You don't have a rap sheet or some weird secret life?" It was clearly a joke, but there was a thread of truth in it. She admitted she had a bit of a type, and unfortunately for her, that type often included guys with bad habits and worse judgment. I laughed it off and reassured her that no, I was not a closet criminal, just a caffeine-fueled student trying to make it through the week without imploding. We'd been chatting for almost a week when we set a date to finally meet up. It wasn't going to be anything wild, just a chill coffee hang after one of her shifts. I was psyched. There was just one more weekend shift to get through, and then I'd meet the girl who had somehow made Tinder feel like something more than a swipe factory. 2 nights before the big meetup, though, fate decided to mess with me in the worst way imaginable. I was walking to a buddy's house for a low-key beer and hangout night when 2 guys jumped me out of nowhere. I didn't even see them coming. 1 second I was texting my friend to say I was almost there. The next, I was being shoved against a wall, fists grabbing at my jacket and neck. The gold chain I wore, the only bit of jewelry I owned, and one I probably should have left at home, caught their attention immediately. I wasn't about to hand it over without a fight. Bad decision? Absolutely. They didn't just want the chain, they wanted my rings too. I lashed out, struggling against them, adrenaline doing its best to keep me upright. Somewhere in the chaos, one of them pulled a knife. I didn't feel the stab at first. I just felt the force of the blow to the back of my head, like someone had hit me with a metal pipe. It wasn't until I stumbled back and touched my neck that I felt the blood. A lot of blood. Oh, and as if the situation couldn't get any worse, the small bag of weed in my jacket pocket spilled out during the scuffle. I hadn't even remembered it was there. So there I was, sitting on the sidewalk, bleeding out of a gash in my skull, surrounded by my own spilled stash and the lingering echo of my attackers' retreating footsteps. I was still sitting there in a haze of shock, blood dripping down my neck and pooling around me, when I heard the sirens. Somebody had called for an ambulance, which, great, because I wasn't in the mood to bleed out on the street that night. My vision was blurry, and my head throbbed like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. All I wanted was to get patched up, go home, and bury myself under a mountain of blankets. The ambulance pulled up, and the doors swung open. That's when I saw her. It was out of all the ambulances in a city of 3 million people, of course it had to be hers. I blinked, trying to process what was happening, but there was no mistaking her. She froze for a split second, staring at me like she couldn't believe it either. Then, like a pro, she snapped into paramedic mode and got to work. "Hey," she said, her voice sharp but professional. "You're bleeding pretty bad. Let's get you on the stretcher." All I could think was, oh my God, I'm bleeding out, and this is the most embarrassing moment of my life. I mean, what were the odds? What kind of sick cosmic joke was this? The girl I'd been texting for a week, who thought it was hilarious to ask if I was sketchy or had a criminal past, was now face to face with me in the most suspicious-looking situation imaginable. I tried to explain as they loaded me into the ambulance, but honestly, there wasn't much I could say. The blood, the knife wound, the scattered weed on the ground, it didn't exactly scream innocent victim. To her credit, she stayed professional the whole ride, but I could feel the awkward tension radiating off of her. We recognized each other immediately, but she didn't acknowledge it beyond a tight-lipped, barely there nod. The ride felt like an eternity. She patched me up as best she could, her movements precise and practiced, but I could feel the judgment. Or maybe I was projecting. Either way, the humiliation was unbearable. I made it to the hospital, got a few stitches, and was sent on my way. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a sickening realization. I was probably never going to hear from her again. Not after that. I sent her a text anyway, something short and light. Well, that was the most awkward first meeting in history. Sorry you had to deal with that. She didn't respond. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. She unmatched me on Tinder, too. It wasn't hard to figure out why. To her, I probably looked like exactly the kind of guy she was trying to avoid, a walking, bleeding embodiment of her worst dating instincts. Now I can laugh about it. At the time, though, it was brutal. I'd gone from riding the high of matching with someone genuinely cool to crashing into the absolute worst first impression imaginable. The irony still kills me. Out of all the ambulances in the city, it had to be hers. Out of all the things I could have been doing, I had to be sitting there looking like the poster boy for bad life choices. I can't blame her for ghosting me. I mean, what would you do if you rolled up to a scene and saw a guy you were planning to date sitting on the sidewalk, bleeding from a knife wound, with weed scattered around him? Exactly. Now, whenever I tell this story, it always gets a laugh. It's ridiculous, right? The kind of thing that sounds too absurd to be real. But it happened, and I've got the scar to prove it. If nothing else, it taught me to keep my gold chain at home, and maybe rethink carrying weed in my pocket when I'm out for a walk. And hey, at least I never have to answer the question, what's your worst first impression story, again. This one's got it locked down.